Brighton, Colorado used to be this little tiny farm town way out in the middle of nowhere, far from everything.
I hate this place, geographical oddity. 2 weeks from everywhere.
Now, it is quickly growing and becoming one of the most popular suburbs in the Denver metro area for people to call home. In this video, we're going to be discussing every single thing that you need to know before calling Brighton, Colorado home. Welcome back to the Mile High Living channel. I'm your host, Mitch Mahaffey. Let's dive on in. Now, I'll be able to offer a little bit of an inside scoop here in this video because this very office that I am sitting in is in my house in Brighton. I am a resident and have been on and off for a very long time, so I feel like I'm pretty well qualified to talk about what living in Brighton is like. I think right now, the term that comes to mind to really describe this city is growing pains. It's growing like crazy, bursting at the seams in some parts, but there are parts of the old Brighton that are still very visible and you can feel them depending on what part of this city that you're in. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with the area, Brighton, Colorado is about 25 to 30 minutes northeast of Denver, and that is all highway, so it's super convenient to get to the big city for any reason. Now, Brighton was once a very small farm town, very proud of its agricultural heritage, and when my family and I first moved out here back in 2012, it was so out of place to see any sort of high-end vehicle that wasn't, the top trim pickup truck. It was still a small town. In fact, if you're watching this locally, the King Supers off of Bridge and 50th didn't exist yet when we first moved out here, and that's been here for years now and is a staple of the surrounding area and the surrounding community. Now, of course, there are a ton of factors that determine how and when and how big a city will grow, and there's quite a few interesting ones to consider when we talk about Brighton, Colorado's recent growth. First and foremost, Brighton, Colorado is framed between two highways that run north-south and connect kind of east-west through the state. Highway 85 goes all the way north, where it connects with I-25 in Wyoming, essentially running north-south from Canada to Mexico. And you have Highway 76 that will connect you into Nebraska, Iowa, into Chicago, and the rest of the United States. So it would make sense that a city framed by two major highways is one where growth happens. Now, you can ask a lot of Brighton residents when you're here, the growth has felt almost explosive. It was slowly, and then about 2018 happened, and then boom, all of a sudden, Brighton's massive. There's new housing developments everywhere, there's new shopping centers, there's new businesses, there's new people from other states all over the place, and what feels like in the blink of an eye, Brighton is no longer this little tiny farm town. Now, before we get too much further into the video, just as a very quick reminder to you guys, I am a licensed real estate broker here in the beautiful state of Colorado, so when it does come time to buy or sell a home or make a move, I would love nothing more than the opportunity to help. Feel free to give me a call or text at the number on the screen. Like I said, I'll be happy to help you out in any way that I can. Now, let's keep going. Now, I think another big factor for Brighton's growth was the fact that for a very, very long time, the amount of house you could get in Brighton for the price in relation to the metro area as a whole was a substantial savings given the size and the location of where Brighton's at. And at the time when houses were still what I would call cheap compared to today, this was when Brighton was a nothing town. There was nothing here. So people were willing to sacrifice some of the quality of life or the big city amenities to be able to achieve home ownership. And then we all know what happened in 2020. Interest rates plummeted, rates were 2.5%, 3.5%. All of a sudden, every single person with a pulse is buying a house and prices are skyrocketing. But before that big spike in prices happened, we had a ton of people with low interest rates coming out here, realizing that you could buy a house in Brighton for $400,000, and at a 2.5% interest rate, the payment is almost non-existent, especially when you compare to what is more traditionally a normal interest rate, like 5%. So let's call it the housing boom of 2020 is what really brought a ton of people to the Brighton area and really what solidified Brighton as such a quickly growing city in the Denver metro area. Now, like I said, 25 minutes to downtown Denver with all of that being on the highway makes it extremely easy to commute to Denver if you work there. So if you work in Denver, but we're looking for a more affordable place to call home that still had easy access, you didn't have to go super far away. It's very convenient to get from Brighton to Denver. So I think that was a big draw for a lot of people as well. Now, the city itself is best described in if we separate it into two different spots. We have Old Brighton, that is to the west, and we have New Brighton, that is to the east. And there's not really a clear defining line that I can discuss, but Old Brighton is where the downtown is at. It's where the original Main Street is at, and there are a ton of small businesses there, a ton of independently owned shops and restaurants, and it's where the government for the city of Brighton is at. And it's this very distinct feel because as you're driving through some of these neighborhoods, the architecture of the houses really reminds me of some neighborhoods in Denver where it's kind of like that older style, but the insides have been renovated with modern building techniques and modern construction materials and modern features. But because of the age of the old side of Brighton, you have these absolutely massive, mature trees. It's almost a scene out of a movie in the summertime when everything's green and you're driving down these streets. It's really cool to see, and it feels very, very, very urban when you're in this part of the neighborhood. As you move further east, where all of the new development has been happening, it feels way more suburban because the houses are more spread out on bigger lots and have been built within the past 10 to 20 years, and even some are a lot newer. There is a ton of new construction going on right now, and a ton more development coming soon that is already in the planning and permitting stages with the city of Brighton. Now let's talk about those growing pains here for a second that I mentioned, and why I think that's a pretty good descriptor of where the city of Brighton is at in this development right now. For a city of 50,000 people and growing in droves every single year, the amount of shops and businesses and things to do that you would expect in a city of this size just aren't quite here yet. Now that is changing. However, change takes time. Building takes time. Permits, approvals, certifications, all of that takes time to do. So for the time being, living here, you quickly run out of places to go and things to do if you're looking to stay within Brighton. Now, like I mentioned, it's not that big of an issue just because how easy it is to get from Brighton to other places, other cities in the state. If you take the toll road, we're 30 minutes away from Boulder, which means hiking, biking, camping, all of those outdoor activities is super easy to get to. If you wanted to even stay in Brighton to go out on a lake, you could do that. There's tons of water at Bar Lake State Park. There are lakes out further east between Brighton and middle of nowhere, if you will, where all of the farm towns, and not farm towns, where all the farms are, way out east. So that's why I said like growing pains. There's plenty to do for about a month or so, and then it starts just getting repetitive. Now, like I said, the development website of the Brighton government, so you can see who has requested permits, what buildings or what businesses want to come here, is all publicly available. So you can see where the new restaurants, where the new stores, where the new housing developments are going. It's just, like I said, those take time to do. Now, another important thing to know before we dive into the cost of living and a few other things about Brighton is that, transportation in Brighton is almost 110% reliant on you having a car. There is really no public transportation available to and from Brighton. If you want to take the light rail or a bus, the closest big stations are either going to be at Denver International Airport or in Thornton, which is just 20 minutes to the west. So keep that in mind. That's a big thing, especially those of you moving from bigger cities that do have access to very well established public transportation. Brighton does not have that and is a very car dependent city. Now, let's dive into the cost of living, because that is something we talk about in every single city that we cover on this channel. Now, as I have prefaced in the past, but if this is the first time you're watching one of our videos, I really like the bestplaces.net kind of scale that they use, because it's out of 100, and that's just an easy number for me to be able to comprehend and wrap my head around. Math was never my strong suit. So the basis for cost of living is 100. 100 is a national average. So anything above that number is more expensive, and anything below that number is less expensive than the national average. Colorado as a whole comes in at 120.5. Brighton, Colorado's overall comes in at 121.3. So it's only this much more expensive to live in Brighton than the Colorado average. Again, this is why tons of people have moved here and are continuing to move here, because as prices grow in other sectors in other cities, Brighton is still the closest to the average. Now, things like groceries, 100.1, the Colorado average, 100.7. Healthcare, 85, a little bit more expensive than the Colorado average at 83.8, but substantially cheaper than the national average. Now, on that note, Brighton does have a very big hospital, Platte Valley Medical Center, right off of Highway 76, but a lot of smaller, more affordable, urgent cares and small family offices are still moving in as the city continues to grow and as the population deems it necessary. Now, like I said, your transportation, Brighton does not have established public transportation, so your transportation costs are going to come in at 119.8. Things like miscellaneous things here and there, shopping, whatever, 111.5. These are some of the most in-line numbers with the state average that we will probably ever discuss on this channel, because Brighton is one of the most affordable cities to live in the Denver metro area if you are looking for the ability to buy a home, be close to the big city, and not be so far away to have to give up on all of those amenities or give up on the lifestyle that comes with being close to a big city. That's the big draw. You can go downtown, work downtown, party, play, whatever in a big city like Denver, but not pay the cost of living premium that comes with being that close or in a big city, and that has been a huge draw for Brighton. Now, Brighton's also incredibly popular for people looking for space. If you want acreage but don't want to be completely isolated from things like high-speed internet and a grocery store that is not an hour away, there is tons of properties for sale in and around Brighton that do have acreage, and the best part, no HOAs, because those suck. And on the topic of cost of living and housing costs, the median cost for a single family residence in Brighton, Colorado is $526,500, compared to the median cost in the other 11 counties that make up the Denver metro area, that is $580,000. So you can see it is substantially cheaper to buy and own a home in Brighton. And again, that is one of the big draws to the city and why so many people are coming here. So when you're searching on Google about Brighton, when you type in Brighton, Colorado, of course there's suggested searches, and one of the more commonly searched questions is Brighton, Colorado a great place to live? Now, of course, that is subjective and everybody's gonna have their own opinion. So moving forward for this part, kind of wrapping up here, this is my opinion, not based in fact. Factoring in everything that we just discussed, with the amount of businesses that are moving here, the amount of people that are moving here, I mean, a lot of the big businesses that are moving here don't do so. They don't enter a new market without spending millions of dollars on market research. So when you have companies like Raising Cane's or In-N-Out Burger moving into a new market, you know they've done their market research. And that tells me that Brighton is going to only continue to grow because of the big growth and the big companies that are moving here. Now, like I said, it does kind of get stale, I guess is a good way to describe it, pretty quickly when it comes for looking at things to do. However, because of that proximity to downtown or any other city in Colorado, it's, in my opinion, Brighton, Colorado is a phenomenal place to call home because you still have very easy access to those things like the ballpark, like going to a Rockies game or going downtown to downtown Denver and enjoying the big city, but you don't pay, as we discussed, that traditional cost of living premium that comes with being this close to a big city. And that's what makes Brighton, in my opinion, such a great place to live. I am very proud to live here, and I love the housing and options that are available for home buyers in the city of Brighton. And as Brighton continues to grow, it's only going to keep getting better. As you are continuing to do your research on the Denver metro area, I'm gonna try and make it as easy as possible for you. I've got more videos popping up on screen right now. Once again, this is the Mile High Living channel. I'm your host, Mitch Mahaffey, and I'll see you guys in the next one.